23 years ago, former Ravens GM Ozzie Newsome drafted not one but two Hall of Famers in the first round of the 1996 draft, the first Baltimore Ravens draft ever. Newsome, if he didn't already have a bronze bust for his time as a player with the Browns, great tight end in his era, would have a bronze bust for his time as a general manager and his contributions to the game. So the NBA draft is tonight. We borrow from the NBA draft for our PFT Live draft, and today's topic, the best all-time NFL drafters, the individuals who are the best all-time at drafting talent in the NFL. Chris Simms, go ahead and draft tails or heads, rigged coin toss. You'll get the first pick, although this is one of those days where there isn't an obvious one. Maybe there isn't an obvious one, so maybe I'll get lucky.
Tails.
And the coin is in the air, and the coin has gotten loose. Like, hey, how about that? I get the first one. Wow. There really isn't an obvious one here. There are a lot of different ways we can go. But, you know, we've spent a lot of time today talking about the greatest player of all time in NFL history, at least the greatest quarterback, possibly the greatest player at any position. And he was found at pick number 199, round 6, in the early days of Bill Belichick's tenure with the New England Patriots. And even though there's been some misses, all in all, they have found a way to identify players who end up being good. They love football. They have that psychology where they take less money for the most part than other players would take. They have built that team from a draft that has brought in both star players and role players and everything in between. Bill Belichick, how can you not make Bill Belichick one of the best drafters of all time when he has put together the best program of all time over the last 19 years in New England, and the way they've run the draft is a huge part of the reason why the Patriots have been so good.
No doubt, Mike. I mean, he's on my list too here. I mean, I'm trying to win the draft, so I'm going to point out some negatives, all right? I mean, and you're right. Bill Belichick, oddly enough, I would say this is like maybe some of his weaknesses to what he is as a GM/head coach. But yet his weakness is still a lot better than the people who have it as a strength. You know, he's missed on like some high-end people, right? But I think where, you know, what you're trying to kind of talk about, and I'll back you up with this, it's okay, yeah, maybe there's been some first and second and third round picks that haven't worked out. But damn, he's got, you know, third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh rounders who have worked out so many times to help build their teams, like you're saying, and the construction of them to where injuries don't hurt, and the manipulating of the draft. And if he doesn't see the right value, to trade down and accumulate more picks. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I necessarily hold him in the highest regard as the best picker, but he's the best manipulator of the draft I've ever seen for sure.
He has 5 Super Bowl MVPs that come from guys taken round 6 or later.
Yeah, right.
Now, 4 of them are Brady, and one's Julian Edelman, who was a 7th-round pick. But, yeah, he knows how to find talent, and you can't have the best football program that the NFL has ever seen without being somebody who knows how to draft, and he knows how to draft. I think because he's such a great coach, it overshadows his draft prowess.
It does.
I needed to have the final rebuttal.
It's okay.
On my case for Belichick.
Well, to even further, I mean, undrafted free agents is where he struck gold too. And I know that's maybe outside the realm of this, but I mean, he's been amazing with getting those like free agent guys too. So I'm not mad at you there. Mine's gonna beat that though in Chuck Noll with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's who I'm gonna lead off with. Why? Go ahead. Make your case, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. Well, I mean, what do you want to talk about? Terry Bradshaw, Mean Joe Green, Joe Frank, Franco Harris, Mike Webster, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Jack Lambert. I mean, Mel Blount. You just go on and on and on. But you know, anything you read about the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they did, I mean, he set them up for that dynasty. It was his vision, his ability to pick talent and late round talent with certain guys who weren't necessarily viewed as like, you know, these big time stars. So yeah, I'm going to put him up there. I mean, there's 4 Super Bowls in that era in the 1970s. That was unheard of at the time. And it was a balanced football team on both sides. I mean, they won the first 2 Super Bowls kind of with defense. And then the second 2 Super Bowls, they won with Terry Bradshaw airing it out and throwing bombs to Stallworth and Swann and things like that too. So yes, I'm going to put Chuck Noll up there towards the top of the list as far as the greatest drafters ever.
Here's where I am not entirely sure
Why?
on whether or not. Here's why.
Yeah.
Because we still don't know who made those picks. Dan Rooney was the GM of those teams, not Chuck Noll.
Yes.
And Bill Belichick clearly was in charge of the New England Patriots and has been. I mean, I had Dan Rooney, not Chuck Noll, on my list because he was the GM of that team, of those teams in the 70s. In the 1974 draft, the best ever. I just don't think Noll is the right guy. Now, that may win you some support when we put this thing on social media and let people vote on it, because I understand where you're coming from. You're coming from that Steelers dynasty altogether. But Dan Rooney was the GM of those teams, not Chuck Noll.
Well, I understand. But any story I've ever read or heard, it's Chuck Noll working out these guys. Oh, I found this guy there. I found this guy there, and I liked him or whatever. So I didn't even know Rooney had the GM role. But whatever, he's the owner, okay? And I've always been led to believe, with anything I've read, and you know I'm a football historian, that Chuck Noll had the say of saying, we want to pick this guy. Now, Dan Rooney, of course, was the owner and could say no, but to me, it's always read like, in my understanding, just talking to people, that Chuck Noll ultimately was the guy that was putting that team together. So I disagree with you there. Screw you, and go to your second-round pick, please.
Here's what's amazing to me. The idea that Chuck Noll was as successful as he was, and he retired at the age of 59, and his name never emerged for a GM job, a VP of football operations, a coaching job somewhere else. I mean, that's amazing to me, that given what he did with the Steelers, in whatever capacity, it never got him any discussion from anyone. Why wouldn't people be clamoring to hire Chuck Noll in the mid-'90s, given everything that he did in the 70s and the teams that he put together? All right, next pick for me. I got to go with... if we're going to talk about dynasties and a guy who was the general manager for the birth of a dynasty in San Francisco, Bill Walsh, coach and GM of the San Francisco 49ers, putting together that team that began with Joe Montana as a third-round pick in 79 and built it into a team that won plenty of Super Bowls in the 80s, a standard bearer. There's that every decade's got its team, and it was the 49ers in the 80s, and it was Bill Walsh's genius that put together that team. So that one's a fairly easy one for me. Bill transforming a horrible franchise into a great franchise was Bill Walsh.
Yeah, I'm not going to, how much did Carmen Policy have in there just to throw a curveball out to you like you did to me?
Now you're
like
trying my move.
Yeah, of course I am. I'm stealing it, counsel. I'm stealing your tricks, okay? But I'm with you. I mean, Bill Walsh is the guy, and I think he was, of course, the guy making a lot of the picks. But whether it's Jerry Rice or Joe Montana in the third round, I mean, again, I think one of the things that goes overlooked with some of those 49er teams in the 80s too, that Bill Walsh doesn't get credit for, because we talk about offense and John Taylor and Roger Craig, and all the time we talk about them. Those defenses were some of the best in football. They were number one, number two. I know my dad certainly had to deal with the 49ers, and that's the one thing he always talks about is nobody gives those defenses credit. They were tough. I don't think they were the 85 Bears or maybe the 91 Eagles, but they certainly were a formidable foe, and that was because of Bill Walsh and his coaching. So I'm not mad at you there either. Man,
Walsh was the GM from 79 to 82. He was the coach from 79 to 88, but he was the GM for the first 4 years, and that's really where they laid the foundation of those teams.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, all right. So, man, this is where it gets hard here. I don't know what to do, okay? I'm going to go with Al Davis, okay? That's my next pick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going with Al. Just win, baby.
Pandering to the Raiders.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, up until the mid-2000s, the Oakland Raiders, or the Oakland, Raiders, whatever the hell you want to call them, all right? They were up towards the top winning percentage in the history of all sports, any team sport combined. They were up there with this from the times Al Davis took over in the 60s. They were relevant all the way up until the mid-2000s. They were always in a playoff conversation, a team that could make it to the Super Bowl. But when you talk about the team in the 70s, of course, wins one Super Bowl. They had Kenny Stabler and, Casper and so many good players on both sides of the football. Branch at receiver, Bolitnikoff. And then it went into the the 80s, and it was Marcus Allen, okay, and they drafted Bo Jackson and figured out, he might come and play for us. They did things like that. You got into the 90s, and they weren't always great, but he found a guy like John Gruden, and then they drafted some guys there and built a team as well. So I'm going to throw Al Davis in there. He's one of the all-time great football minds, and to me, one of the best draft pick and talent evaluators ever.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's just what happened after the 2002 Super Bowl, the disintegration of the franchise during the final 9 years of his time running it. Even though he wasn't the GM actively, the longevity, I think, had a lot to do with it. And the team was so good back in the 70s. They were always that team that was right on the brink of winning a Super Bowl before they finally did to cap the 76 season. All right, you've left one for me that is very obvious. People think it's a fairly recent development in football that coaches end up finagling GM powers as well. Vince Lombardi, when he arrived in Green Bay, was the coach and the general manager, and he put together the team of the 60s, the dominant force. Back when there was no free agency, the only way you were getting your players was through the draft, and I think they had 72 rounds of the draft back in those days. So it's not like there was much in the way of undrafted free agency. You had to be able to pick and pick and pick and pick, and he put together that team that won 5 NFL championships and the first 2 Super Bowls. So this one's easy. I sandbagged you on that one, baby. Vince Lombardi maybe should have been the first overall pick.
That is pretty good. I'm not going to deny any of that. I mean, yeah, he's Vince Lombardi, and there's a reason the Super Bowl trophy is named after him. And honestly, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really even think of him. That's a shame on me, and I don't even have an argument to look back to see if who he drafted and who he didn't to crap on your theory there. So good pick by you, okay? Good pick.
No, at least you're, hey, man, at least you're candid. I like that.
I try to be. This is, I don't know where to go. And since you're done, I'm going to throw the names out there that Bill Parcells, he's in my mind here. Okay, Jimmy Johnson, what he did with that Cowboys team, I mean, that was unbelievable. 3-year haul in the draft where you just went, wow. I mean, that might have been the best 3 years ever. I'm torn between that. I'm telling you, Ozzie Newsome and John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks, I think, is in this conversation too. I think he's that special of a picker, but I'm going to go with Ozzie Newsome. I am. I think ultimately, and I love Jimmy Johnson and what he did, but I think just the longevity of what Ozzie Newsome did in building these teams that were so competitive, so physical, tough, finding those right guys that fit the theme and the mantra of how the Baltimore Ravens wanted to play for basically over 20 years straight. And there's only a few years here and there where the team wasn't any good. And I don't know if I can necessarily say it was ever Ozzie Newsome's fault. There were some years where I think the coaching was, below average, or they got a little unlucky with injuries. But man, it's one of the greatest GMs of all time. Whether you want to talk about Ray Lewis and some of the great defensive players he's drafted, the big offensive linemen. I mean, he's had it all, and they were one of the best franchises of the last 20 years because of him and how he set them up.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.